Hello, everybody. It's been several months since I've had this guy over here on the channel, and I just couldn't wait to get him back on again. But goodness, it's like, two family people and, all the things that go on in between. You have in your head sometimes like this idea of, oh, it's going to be a couple of weeks. And next thing you know, it's a few months down the line. But I've got Vic on today because we're going to talk today about the Rashis and the Nakshatras and the relation between those two things amongst anything else that kind of pops in our head along the way. So all you people who like to write in the comments section below how us two guys are getting really off topic, this is the topic. Oh yeah, this is the topic, right? We take it as it goes. It comes up, and that's life. So, Anyway, here's Vic.
Hell yeah. Hari. Yes, so you want to talk about the relation of Rashi and Nakshatra. That's a great topic.
Exactly. Especially because I had seen something that you had written in your blog about local space and the Rashis and space beyond that. And it kind of tapped into a thought pattern that I've always had in trying to understand the different elements of astrology. Can I share that first? Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
Before we go into it, yeah. Which is there are sections of Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra early on in Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra, and I may have the chapter wrong here, but what's important is the text, is the supreme unborn spirit has had many descents. Janardana, in the form of the Grahas, rewards the fruits of the karma of the living beings. So right here, we've got it laid out that the planets are conscious incarnations of Vishnu. So they are actual conscious things. And then there's another portion of Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra that says the imperceptible Vishnu, Janardana, is the figure of time whose limbs become unconscious as the Rashis beginning from the Ram. So I've always, meditated upon that and thought of the fact that a Rashi isn't going to have any consciousness in it unless there is something acting through it. Meaning a planet, either through a planet occupying it or a planet casting its glance upon that Rashi, or a planet ruling over that particular Rashi, or even the concept of nakshatras, which something I find is that I've not found in Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra, is that definition of the nakshatras. And in understanding the nakshatras, we can know that each nakshatra has a particular shakti, a particular energy is a limited word, but for those people who can't really understand the word of shakti, it's I'm sure Vic will explain that better than I am because he's really good at things like that. But each nakshatra has a particular energy. As the nakshatras are considered to be the wives of the moon. The moon, on many levels, relates to our manas, or our sensory mind, or our capacity for consciousness while we're here, incarnated. And so if the nakshatras are the wives of the moon carry the energy of that particular deity that's connected to each nakshatra. So what the nakshatras do is they actually grow our consciousness. But I've always taken them to be something that's way beyond the Rashis, way beyond, obviously, the houses, way beyond the planets, something that's much more vast. I've often liked to do a illustration, right, which kind of goes a little bit like this. I'm going to do the hand jive for everybody here. So, here we have conscious incarnations of Vishnu, right? Here are all these planets here, okay? Here we have Earth, our incarnation here on Earth, us being affected through the houses by the Rashis, and further on by the planets. So here where you have the Rashis and you have the houses, it's like you've got the encasement in Maya. The individuals here in Maya having an experience going through relationship problems or career problems. Those career problems are defined in a certain way by the particular Rashi that the Bhava is in. But beyond that are these conscious incarnations of Vishnu and these powers given by God to grow our consciousness, which is here on this side, so that we can connect to God, which is beyond all these things, beyond the planet. Sure, Vishnu's in the planets, right? And if a planet, through a planet impacting a Rashi, that Rashi begins to have consciousness in it. But all these things that we're experiencing here on Earth, when we go through our incarnation, when we go through our relationship problems, when we go through our career problems, our problems paying the rent, right? None of those things have any meaning until God gives them meaning, or until we grow our consciousness enough to understand the meaning. And sometimes that meaning may seem as simple as, I've got to work harder in order to pay my bills. But usually there's something that's much more vast beyond that. And that's when I think you're getting to the nakshatras that are trying to get you to grow a particular aspect of your consciousness so that you can drop this limitation that you're having over here and relate to more of God over here. And of course, God doesn't have to be over here. God doesn't have to be up there. God's everywhere, right? But we need a model to understand things through, so to speak. As a matter of fact, God is in all of those things. But here on this side, we're not perceiving it because we're lost in Maya. And I've always found astrology to be such a really wonderful tool for understanding this experience that we're going through. But were it not for the nakshatras, were it not for the planets, were it not for something to give consciousness to this particular aspect of our being, then, confusion might be greater, so to speak. Anyway, what are your thoughts? I've kind of gone off on a several-minute tangent. Started off with a 1-minute idea, it becomes a 7-minute concept.
The concept of planets as people is something very fundamental, I think, to learning astrology and how things operate. The very nature of looking at the sky will show you that the planets are symbolic, at least, of people. Because like the way that the Brihat Parashara Horashastra opens up by saying, after it gets all the philosophical stuff out of the way, it says, there's many lights up in the sky. There's a lot of jyoti in the sky. There's a lot of little points of light, jyotinam. And amongst them, some are called nakshatra, and some are called graha, and the grahas are the ones who move. Graha itself means something that has power of comprehension, to grasp something.
Right.
So that's consciousness.
Right.
So they're like conscious entities. And if you look with your eyes up at the sky for a couple of days in a row, you'll notice that the planets move. They change their position relative to the other guys, but the rest of them don't. And in fact, each one moves in its own way. They're all independently moving at different speeds in different directions sometimes. And
they change their behavior from time to time too.
Right. So they look like people moving through places, and that's really what is going on. And so to get your bearings straight on how to interpret things, it's real important to know that that's what these symbols are doing. The planets are the symbols that are the people, and the signs are so the people have things that they want to do. Like you have something you want to do, I have something I want to. So if you're Mercury, then you want to comprehend things. And if I'm Jupiter, then I want to explain things or grow things. So then you put me in a certain place, like you put me in a discotheque. Then my Jupiter is not so happy. I can't really find out how to do my moral assessment and things and stuff like that. But if you put me in a church, then all of a sudden I'm a little bit more comfortable and I know what's going on there and I behave better and I can accomplish my goals more easily. And I accomplish certain kind of goals depending on the kind of place I'm in. And Mercury, put him in a discotheque, he can tell some jokes and have a little bit of a good time. Put him in the library, he can get really smart and study things. So that's how you can interpret planets and signs really easily, by keeping a person place framework. I like that. Then the other thing about the different areas of space, if you want, I think we could get to that, the main topic.
Oh, most definitely, yes.
Yeah, really cool. The Vedas always tend to divide things into three, or show three aspects of things. Even one of the names of Vishnu is Triadisha, the Lord of Threes. So it divides the whole universe into three sections. Sometimes it's described as the lower, middle, and higher sections. But in Gayatri Mantra, which is a very important mantra because it encapsulates the message of the whole Veda, the seed words which are used there are a different kind of a threefold division. So if you mix up the two threefold divisions, you'll get confused. One of the threefold divisions is lower, middle, higher. The middle one just has one lok, that's Bhulok, that's the earth, and then there's 6 below. And then the higher has another 7 that go up, and it goes to like Gyanalok, Tapalok, Maharlok, things like that. But that's like a different way of looking at the universe in terms of dimensions and realms, and where different types of entities exist. What the Gayatri is saying, it's more astrological really, because it's actually the primary, most basic topic of Gayatri is the sun. Savitu, Tat Savitu Varenyam. The most primary topic is the sun. Of course, it means a lot more than the sun, but the subject starts at the sun. So it does have astrological significance built into it. And the way that they define the three words, the three worlds there is Bhu, Bhuva, Swa. So Bhu, that means the place where things exist. That's the earth, the place where we exist. Bhuva means a little bit above that. And Sva means way out there, in a different place, up in the high, far away place. And so the sun, it lights up all three of these things. It lights up outer space, it lights up the sky, and it lights up the earth. So that's what the mantra is saying. But if we think about it in terms of the primary components of astrology are the planets, much like the people, the actors, the doers. That's why they're also called karakas so often. 99, whatever, karaka, right? That the karaka, that very word means that they're a person. They're doing something. They have some intention to do something. So the planets are the actors. And then you have the places and the resources that they use to act. Right. Those are the houses and the signs.
The stage of the scenery, so to speak.
Yes. So that's like the local space. And then there's this deeper space, which are the nakshatras.
And the reason, one of the, the main reason I wanted to have you on is because I love talking to you. But when I read the the relevance that you've just drawn, because I actually read that on your blog, I found it much better at putting into words the concept which I was trying to describe at the beginning of this. And I've always been looking for the proper way to put that there.
Great. I'm an editor. That's one of the things I do. I'm an editor. So I figure out how to make words more compact.
Exactly. Yes.
There's a saying in Sanskrit too, that the author of a sutra feels more joy by subtracting a word than from sex.
Right.
They get more joy from subtracting a word from a sutra than by having sex, or something like that. So it's just the thrill of reducing the words and making them more accurate is just so enchanting for the editors and the sutradharis, the sutrakarakas, the sutra writers. So going back to that BPHS, Brihat Parashara Horashastra bit, right? Yeah. It starts off by saying there's lights in the sky.
Yeah.
Some of them are nakshatras. Literally, nakshatra means star. I mean, actually, I'm doing those Sanskrit videos now. I have that series on YouTube now, which is like analyzing the Sanskrit words used for astrological terms. And I analyzed nakshatra. It's pretty interesting. But by and by, the actual connotational definition of it, the way we use the word, it means star.
Right. What are just out of interest? I don't want to get you too far off topic, but what are some of the other meanings that you
nakshatra?
Yeah, that
well,
you've discovered.
Naksha actually means the destination.
That makes sense too.
Nakshatra means the thing which makes the destination. So, or the thing which makes it's not, naksha doesn't just mean destination, but it means like the area in which you operate.
Yeah.
The places where you can go are the naksh. Naksh has an implication of going.
Right.
Simply. And tra as a suffix is like, if in English we have like a tor or like a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Is a refrigerator.
Yeah. Right.
In Sanskrit. I don't know exactly what it is in Sanskrit. The tra is like tor, the way we use tor as a suffix in English.
Yeah.
Something that makes something.
Right.
So the nakshatras are the things which make space. That's the really, really basic literal definition of what it is, which in other words is the stars. Without stars, you can't measure any distance. If there's no objects in space, it becomes completely imperceptible. That's why it's called akash. Akash means it's imperceptible.
And so without those stars, then we wouldn't have quite as deep of a relevance to our own position, place, experiences, so to speak. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it says, out of all the lights in the sky, some are nakshatra stars and some are graha. And then it says, uses the Sanskrit word tu, which means but. And just like in English, when you say but, this means, now this is a little bit different.
Right.
But there's also rashis, to pronounce it right. So this is so interesting too, right? It says there's lights in the sky. Some of them are nakshatras, some of them are grahas, but other things are rashis. So that means that the rashis are not the stars.
Yeah.
Now people also, when they hear about sidereal, it just sounds like a word. Like for the longest time, I had no idea what sidereal meant or even how to pronounce it. Was it sidereal or sidereal?
Right.
But it's a Latin word, and it means stellar.
Mm.
So like literally sidereal means stars. So if something is sidereal, it means nakshatra. It's just a synonym. Sidereal is a synonym for nakshatra because nakshatra means stars in Sanskrit and sidereal means stars in Latin.
Right.
So sidereal things are stellar, but the Shastra right in the beginning says, but the rashis are something else. They're not stellar. And a tropical, that's a great word. Somebody made a comment on one of my YouTube videos, their name was Tropical Bliss. And I was like, wow, I wonder if they're into astrology or is this just like a picture of like a palm tree growing on a beach?
Right.
I like tropical better than sidereal because space is cold.
Yeah.
Tropical is nice and warm.
Planets are kicking back.
Yeah.
They've got their drink,
So people, neither do they know what sidereal means, nor do they know what tropical means. But yet they all argue about the two topics. You should know that at least what the names of the things you're arguing about are. So sidereal, it means stars, and tropical means, well, that spot that's warm and vacation spots where there's palm trees and beaches, it's that way because it's near the equator. Tropical means the latitude or longitude north or south of the equator. Tropical means relative to the equator. So that's the other way of judging space. When you say buva, when you say bu, you're talking about the actual ground that you can put your feet on. And that's what the houses are. The houses are all based on the eastern horizon. The horizon is the dirt, the rocks, the stuff you can touch, the bu. You look out there to the east, and there's your first house. There's your ascendant. There's your anchor point for the first house. And then the rest of them are just those 30-degree positions, depending on your system. But in the ancient system, it's just the rest of them are just 30-degree points relative to that eastern horizon. So bu means houses. Then buva, it's not the earth, but it sure sounds like it, right? Even you can hear buva. It's a bit above the earth. It's still very related to the earth. So what does that mean? What is the space that's related to the earth? It's the space that's related to the tropical, to the equator. The buva is the stuff that's related to the equator. How can you measure space? It's very difficult. Like I said, it's a akash.
Yes.
So it doesn't have properties. space is one substance that has no properties except dimension. But in order to feel the dimension, to perceive the dimension, there has to be something else in space.
And the moment we try to define and measure the imperceptible and the ineffable, is the moment that we limit it with our definition of it. And so that really explains the whole bit from Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra about the Rashis being unconscious, because the moment we try to define that space, we're limiting something.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And Vishnu is also synonymous with Akash, actually. You're not really fully understanding the word Vishnu if it's only synonymous with Akash, but Vishnu itself means the thing which is everywhere. Vishva, Nu. The thing which exists everywhere is Vishnu. And that's also what that verse is really saying, like, the space which exists everywhere becomes these measurable limbs by being the Rashis.
Yeah.
So that's how it becomes Vibodha. That's how you can understand it very clearly, only in terms of these Rashis. And what the Rashis are, how would you measure space? You'll either measure it with stars, or you'll measure it relative to yourself. If you measure it with stars, then you're talking about sidereal stuff. So then you're talking about nakshatras, constellations. If you're talking about relative to me, then it's going to be things that you can notice, like shadows. It's going to be between the sun and you, or the sun and your spot, sun and the equator and your spot relative to the equator. And that's what the tropical space is. That's what the Bhuva space is. So basically, how do you measure that? It's actually really easy. It sounds really abstract, but it's really easy. It's just like the sun wanders north and south from the equator. And when you read Puranas, and if you read Surya Siddhanta, this is literally what they say word for word when they give the definition of what Rashis are. They'll say the sun moves north and south of the equator, and when it comes to the line of the equator, when it's exactly over the equator, Aries begins. And then when it gets as far north as it can of the equator, then Cancer begins. So and that's why they're called Rashis, really, because the sun is called Rashmivat. The one who has rays, and then the Rashis are the collections. Collections of what? Collections of rays.
Rays.
Of the sun's rays. This is how the sun shines throughout the year, and it's collected into these little sections based on its position relative to the moon, relative to the equator. Right. And why 12? Because the moon spins around 12 times during this whole course of the sun going around once. So that's what a Rashi is. The Rashi is the local space which is measured by the sun moving north and south of the equator. And then there's a mysterious thing called Ayanamsha, which is a beautiful thing. Because if the nakshatra have absolutely no relationship to us on Earth, then they're useless to us. They might as well not exist. Right. So there has to be a way to give them some connection to where we are standing. And the way to do that is Ayanamsha. Ayanamsha is that secret key which allows you to locate the Rashis relative to the nakshatra. So the idea that the nakshatra and Rashis are locked together is a difficult misconception to get out, to beat out of your mind. Well, especially if you've been working that way for 12, 15 years. I myself was like about 5 years working with sidereal concept of things. Which the sidereal concept is that, well, Aries are like what is it called? Nakshatras are like another kind of amsha.
Right. Yeah.
But they're not actually. The amshas are totally different than the nakshatra. Amshas means part. Right. Nakshatra doesn't mean part. Nakshatra means stars. They're not just another amsha and locked into certain positions in the Rashi. They're separate and they move, but the Ayanamsha is the key to know how far has the Ayana progressed, how much Ayana is there, how much movement is there between such and such star and that point where the sun comes over the equator. Which you can... Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
Which is actually easy to measure. You can do it with a stick in the ground and just measure the length of the shadow. Like, you don't need telescopes and complicated math. you can just keep track of the length of the day and night. And when it gets equal, that's the beginning of Aries or Libra. So it's very easy, very primitive technology, basic technology can handle this kind of stuff really easy.
Yeah, I don't want to get you off topic, but there was a point that was surfacing as you voiced what you just voiced, which is somebody in one of our previous videos had posed a question, because I use different calculations for the nakshatras than you do. Yeah. And there are at least a couple of different ways to calculate the nakshatra positions or the longitude of the nakshatras, one of which is using the ecliptic to draw, to determine the position of the star relevant to the nakshatra. And the system that I use uses the poles and the equator. And the reason that I use the poles and the equator is as the Earth rotates on its axis, if you observe the stars are not moving north to south like the ecliptic. They're moving east to west like the equator does, right? So if you are trying to judge the relevant position of a star associated with the nakshatra, and you're using the point where it intersects the ecliptic, then that star will appear to be right here, whereas roughly it's actually maybe right over here.
Yeah,
and so it raises an interesting concept. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that per se.
Well, it's the first time that I've ever understood your system. Thank you for explaining it.
Yeah, and
what the heck was going on.
It's a very interesting system. And interestingly enough, if you're using a sidereal zodiac and you use the equatorial positions of the nakshatras, it doesn't work. But if you're using a tropical zodiac, if you use the equatorial position of the nakshatras, I have found it works to be much more sound and solid. Oh. Mm. If you do a lot of work with nakshatras, at least, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I love them.
Yeah.
They're just so
they're vast.
Readily offer their information so readily.
Without
having to mix 1,000 things together, you just get relevant information from a planet and nakshatra. Bam, you get a nice interpretation.
And it's interestingly enough, when I first started working with Vedic astrology, I wasn't even, Rashis weren't coming into my head. Planets and nakshatras were coming into my head.
I wish that was the truth for me, but I didn't really discover nakshatras until Dennis Harness's book.
I have a funny story to tell you with that. So, all kudos to Dennis Harness, because I was actually in a bookshop one day, right? And I had been fascinated with the nakshatras as I was exploring Vedic astrology, and was in a bookstore. And I was just going to the bookstore. I wasn't planning on looking for anything connected with Vedic astrology, because to be honest, I didn't expect to find anything in that bookstore, because it wasn't a bookstore that would have had anything like that. Bam.
That was your first book?
Exactly.
Wow.
On the nakshatras.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think my first book was Heart Defoe's Light on Life, which had a section on nakshatras.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it was just, there was so much else it was mixed in with everything else.
And that was my second book on it.
Very good book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Different people have different ways of doing things.
Yeah. I think I find it's whatever, I think it's associated with the individual and their inherent tendencies towards things, I've always found, really.
And also they're going to just, let's abstract it from astrology and just take it to anything. Like different people have different techniques, and it suits them as an individual because they have different strengths or weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if I have a computer that's really not good at video editing, but yet I never edit videos, and who cares? My computer works fine for me.
Yeah,
and right?
Exactly, right.
So there may be some systems that are not actually exactly perfect, but people can use them really well as long as they use the right techniques.
Yeah.
That's why I think if you observe the trends in astrology, it's very interesting. like the trends in modern astrology have come away from house and lordship interpretations because they get all mixed. I don't know. My personal opinion, I really like, I used whole sign houses. I just like old stuff, simple stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't look beautiful naked, then it's not beautiful. If it doesn't work stripped down and bare and just basic, then it doesn't really work. So I need the stuff to be beautiful and work in its most basic raw form. Otherwise, I don't trust it. So that's what I work with. I work with whole sign houses. I don't have any need. Same thing with me on Lahiri. It's just like I never felt the need to change from Lahiri because it works for me. And the day when and maybe it works for me because I don't use it in exactly the same way that you do. So I haven't found that part where it doesn't work. But as for me, it's working right now. And I have a really saying, sometimes you fall in love with your own sayings. But I have this one saying, like, you can build stuff with a broken screwdriver.
Exactly. Yes.
So people will also say, like, how could it be that Rashis are tropical? There's like 600 years or more of Indian tradition, which is based on interpreting sidereal Rashis. How can it be?
I'm glad we're getting onto this. Yeah.
Well, it's not like that's like 100% of astrology is just how you calculate your zodiac, first of all. Second of all, even if something is broken, you can make it work, especially if you have other powers and other things, and you start to rely on different things which work in spite of having this other thing being wrong. Like, look at modern Western astrology. It's so into aspects, everything about, and whenever I hear them talking, they're always talking about this thing square that, and this thing trying that, and this thing sextile, and what do they say, like a coming together, separating, all the stuff. They're really into it. They've really developed their aspectual interpretive techniques, and they say nothing basically about what house is what lord is in what house, all the Western astrology that I've encountered. And I think that's because they got all wrapped up into this like unequal sign houses. And they're just like, it's not, their system that they have isn't good for that. They screwed up the house system. But then look what they did. They wound up going into something else, which does work. And so, there's plenty of great astrologers who are better than anybody using tropical signs because they have their own techniques. And many astrologers don't even have astrological techniques. They just have some siddhi or some perfection or special power as a result of things that they've done in previous births where they can just get information into their heads easily.
I want to continue this topic that you're bringing up about the, several hundred years of tradition of using sidereal. But while we're on the subject and we're talking about the contrast between our two different systems, I like using house cusps, but I also use equal house. I use equal house for that very thing that you're talking about, to simplify the thing. And then when I'm looking at the house cusp, I'm defining a specific point, more detailed within that field. And the reason I like using house cusps is because house cusps can have nakshatras. And
house cusps can have nakshatras.
And you can also assign a Varga deity to the house cusp. You see?
Yeah, that sounds great. I use house cusps too. I just use them straightforward. Like, for example, if your ascendant is 25 degrees Capricorn, then your house cusp in every house is 25. That's what I say.
Right. You use an equal. Yeah, I got you with that. Yeah. I use Campanus is what I tend to use. Yeah.
I like your system. Your system is fascinating. It's one of those things that after I grow up, like, I have to outgrow my toys first before I go and get new toys. So I have plenty of toys to work with. Yeah. But yours
I completely understand that too. I've actually been finding that I've been having too many toys.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm getting distracted, and I'm going, you know what? I'm getting distracted. Let's just go back to simple things. Then once the simples, once I'm feeling like I don't have to go to the nth degree with something, then I'll define it a little bit more. But I'm going to take it easy on myself.
And people can also hide behind complexity too.
Yeah, exactly.
You can hide behind complexity. Exactly. You didn't get it right because the birth time was off by blah, blah, blah. And or because you didn't know this magic technique mentioned in some obscure text. And once you know that magic technique mentioned in the red book of Lal Kitab or something, then all of a sudden you'll know everything then.
Right, exactly.
But really,
truth is, you'll never know
so much
everything.
Smoke and mirrors.
No matter how much you want to know everything.
But if you want to get close,
Yeah.
You should just strip down, really.
Exactly.
The simplicity is really moves towards unity, and unity is where it's at.
Exactly.
Unity is where the knowledge really is.
Exactly.
This differentiation is just division. That's ditya. That's ditya. It produces daityas. It produces demons.
Exactly.
Unification is aditya. It produces the adityas. It produces the gods. So move towards that.
Most definitely. But back to several hundred years of tradition. So how do you address people who bring that up? What are your thoughts on that?
You have to have a prominent Rahu to be a person like me. I do have, most of my planets are just across the street from Rahu. Like everybody's kind of in the vicinity of 180 degrees from Rahu. So like everybody, my Rahu is like really big. It's a prominent planet in my chart. It's not the most prominent. Jupiter is the most prominent. But you have to have a prominent Rahu, or you have to have the right kind of nakshatras. Like I have a Uttara Ashadha nakshatra rising.
Right.
So it's like an elephant.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's also an elephant who sees the horizon and is aware of anything that might close in on it from every side. And why has it become aware of that horizon? Because it's bumped its head too many times to the extent that it goes, I'm tired of getting a headache. So I just want to.
It's the wise elephant.
You got it.
So, I mean, you do have to be a little bit of a punk rocker.
Yeah.
To be able to say, well, to hell with tradition. Or you have to be really, really, really into what the tradition really is. For example, I had a guru who, in some senses, I still have, but there's a guru who told me the very true thing about Vedic culture, which is that it's based on the Vedas. And if somebody doesn't teach something based on the Vedas, then it's not Vedic. But then some of the things that very person said aren't exactly the actual direct way that you would interpret what the Vedas says. So by following that teacher, I have to reject those things. Right? Otherwise, if I don't reject those things, then I'm actually not honoring that teacher. Because primary...
I was going to say, can you go a little more in depth with that? I understand what you're saying. Okay.
I don't want. It's it's really off topic. It's not an astrology guru.
But it's not. But it's not, though. You see, because if you do not reject things that do not fit in with the Vedas, even if it is hundreds of years of tradition, then that's more of where I was going. Yeah.
You have to. I'll go in depth with this.
Yeah.
People should also study Nyaya. Like there's so many different disciplines in India. There's 6 darshans, right? People should be acquainted with them. I mean, it's come to that point. It's not a new thing anymore. It's not like yoga. What's that? Okay, great. Let's be yogis and wear leotards and do stretches. It's gone beyond that now. It's evolved beyond that now. It's time for us to really get into the real deal. Vedic astrology, cool. Let's do it. Yay, we're Vedic astrologers. No, it's time to actually learn what this stuff is. There's 6 darshans in India, and we should learn them. And one of them is Nyaya. And Nyaya is just so helpful. It means logic.
Yeah.
It's just such a helpful it's a helpful thing. It lets you think about anything you want to think about and teaches you how to think. And one of the first subjects of Nyaya is what's the pramana? What's your epistemology? What's your way of knowing anything? And they say that Nyaya says there's 4 valid ways. That they say that ultimately the only valid way of knowing anything is experience. But experience is faulty because of our limitations in experiencing. We can only experience within our own spectrum.
Right.
So then they introduce themselves as Nyaya. Hey, we're going to help you with that. We're going to clarify your mind so that your spectrum of experience can improve. So that's another pramana is logic. And then a third pramana is education or shabda. What other people have already figured out, you can learn from that too. And then they have a 4th thing called upamana, which means analogy. Most other schools just say analogy is a kind of logic. So then they also say, now there's a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Now the Vedanta is another school, which is there's actually only 2 Vedic schools of thought in India. It's either Uttara or Purva Mimamsa. It's either Uttara Veda or Purva Veda. the first part, the Purva Mimamsa, is all about Rig, Sama, Yajur, Atharva.
Right.
And so it's very karma oriented, and a lot of real traditional Indian astrologists come from that camp. And these are the people that are super, super heavy. They really believe that there's nothing beyond karma. Karma is everything. You don't even really exist. You're just you're a product of karma. You don't have any free will. Everything is karma.
Right.
All you have to do is do the right karmas. You get the right results. There's nothing beyond that. That's the one school of Indian thought. And a lot of astrology comes from that, because it likes the idea astrology is all about karma, fate, destiny. And then there's Uttaramimamsa, which is about, this is based on Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, primarily. Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita.
Right.
And some have the Bhagavad Purana. My particular school is Bhagavad Purana. But this part, there's all kinds of, they say, no, the consciousness is the root. It's not, karma is not the ultimate thing, but consciousness is the ultimate thing. And so there is will. There's also karma, but there's will, and will generates karma. So they say that the most important way of getting knowledge is by education. But your teacher has to be qualified. Logic also, Nyaya also says that you have to have what's called an apta purusha as a teacher, an experienced person. The more experience they have, the better they can give you education. And so the Vedanta says, if you want to know stuff that's beyond the purview of direct experience, then you have to have, God himself has to tell you.
Right.
It has to be revealed transcendentally. And they said that's what the Veda really is. But this Veda has to be known through careful study. So those are the first four sutras of Brahma Sutra. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now you should ask about spirit. Janmadhyasya yata. Why should you ask about spirit? Because it's the essence of everything and the source of everything. You don't really know anything unless you figure this out. Then it says, who will you ask about spirit? Shastra Yonitva. You have to ask the sacred texts, which are the record of the revelation that's come from transcendence. And then the fourth one is Tattu Samanvaya. You can't just read them like a book, or you can't just pick out quotes either. You have to study the whole thing holistically and understand it as a total thing, and understand how each part relates to the other parts. Then you can get this full experience of transcendence. So they make a careful point to say, the whole reason why I'm going off on this tangent,
no, please.
It's because they make a careful point to say that there's a difference between what they call the Aitihasa Panta or the Apurusheya Parampara. People who are from India, they'll dig this, because these are like Hindi words too. Most of the modern Indian languages still have these words. But you have like, one thing is a Panta. Panta just means a path. Most of the people who say we have a Parampara, they don't have a Parampara. There's no Parampara for Jyotish. There's no Parampara for for Purva Mimamsa either. There's no Parampara. Parampara means what has come from above has come from below, but the first above must be Param. Triguna right. Param, beyond right. the three modes, beyond the whole, right. must be transcendental. There's no such thing for Jyotish. Jyotish is transmitted through pantas, through a path, like through a lineage. Lineage is not synonymous with parampara. Lineage is a tradition. That's called an aitihasa pramana. It comes through history, or various things can become traditions, like caste system can become traditions. Untouchables can become traditions. Brides being forced to burn themselves can become a tradition. You know, all kinds of horrific things have occurred in India, with the most beautiful of places, because of tradition. So to say, well, India has been doing it this way for so long, so it couldn't have possibly been any other way. If you want to adopt that philosophy, then you'll have to adopt all kinds of crazy stuff, like infanticide and like this like weird casteism, where there's these people are just like get off scot-free because they're born in a family. Even if you commit a crime, you can't punish them. You know, there's other people are like spat on, and that's their, it's a lot of bad things happen in India. So things can happen bad. Krishna himself says, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata, that again and again, glani, bad stuff happens in Dharma and it has to be repaired. So it's not, it can't be like, no, it couldn't possibly happen that something went wrong in India. It's Kali Yuga, it's the Dark Ages. Things go wrong everywhere all the time.
But, while you're saying that, the little light is going on in the back of my head. Bing! And it's going, okay, tradition, right? And how tradition can not always be something that's good. Then there is that which is beyond, the essence that's beyond the tradition. That's the Nakshatras. The essence that's beyond. The essence that's beyond all these interpretations that we place upon things. So the Rashis, of course, that's where the confusion point happens. That's where the confusion between the two different systems happen. But beneath it all, there's the Nakshatras.
So Nakshatras are analog now to the Shastra. The Shastra, real Indian culture, the real Bharatiya culture, the real Vedic culture is not just somebody's tradition.
Right.
That came from somebody with a beard. Just because you have a beard doesn't mean that you're a rishi.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you're a pundit. Or just because you put 3 lines in your head doesn't make you a sadhu. So you have to really have the quality. The real source of tradition is supposed to be Vishnu.
Right.
And the Vishnu is actually the Veda.
Right.
That's his breath. That's his word. So if tradition embodies and exemplifies and illustrates the Veda, then that tradition is fantastic and should be preserved. But where the tradition deviates from the Veda, that tradition should be eradicated. That's why Rahu and Ketu are useful.
Exactly.
Important.
Yes.
That's why there's Rudra. That's why there's a destroyer. Niriti. That's why there's these horrible gods, because some negative energy is needed. It's not just yes, Guruji, yes, Guruji. If you want real knowledge, then Krishna said in Gita that you have to, no, that's not the one. I got this verse in my head, but it's just pariprashnena sevaya. Tad vidhi pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya. Upadekshanti te jnananas tattva darshana. If you want to get knowledge from a person who has it, you have to do 3 things. Seva. You have to do something, reciprocation with them. They're going to give you something. You should give something back. Pranipat, which means you should go low. You should take a position of somebody who needs to learn, not somebody who's going to argue and stuff like that. But pariprashna, you have to question like anything. With that mood of seva and pranipat, with the mood of humility and service, you have to question. Pariprashna, prashna, right? Everybody knows prashna, it's right. Questions. Yeah. Pariprashna means asking all around. You got to ask up a storm. So it's not just, yes, it's a tradition, I accept it. My guru said it, so I accept it. That can be useful if you're not very intelligent, but you're not going to get it really deep into your heart just by believing in something. I mean, if it's really true that you really accept something because your guru said it, then that's beautiful. But if you're just too lazy to really figure out why your guru sees and experiences life and whatever the subject is that way, then you're just a lazy disciple. The lazy disciple just records what the guru says and then repeats it. But the real disciple digs into it, figures it out, and experiences it for himself. And that's parampara. When the param becomes para, when what the guru sees becomes what the disciple sees. What the guru experiences becomes what the disciple experiences. Then it's parampara. So, and then you have these people who I actually think they're audacious, who say this stuff is irrelevant. What the Puranas say about the Rashis is irrelevant. We only care what so-and-so pundit says. That's so audacious. And then, fine, though, you can say, that's fine if you say that, but if you have the audacity to say that you're a Vedic astrologer, but then to say that what so-and-so Swami says is more important than what the Veda says. What are you saying? You're a Vedic astrologer, but you don't put any value on the Veda? Well, these are just religious books. You have no idea what what the Veda is if you say it's just a religious book.
Right,
you never studied it if you think it's a religious book. It's not a religious book. A Purana has 10 topics. Sarga, Visarga, Shrishti, Stiti. Sarga, Visarga, Stiti. These 3 things are all about the universe. And Stiti, because of Stiti means how the universe is situated. Because of that, it tells you what the Rashis are, it tells you what the Nakshatras are, it tells you what the planets are.
Yes.
It tells you the lokas, the 14 divisions. So these are not religious books. These are books of transcendental knowledge. And astrology is a small part of it, and it's in there. And there's stuff about astrology that's not in the Veda, that's fine. But there should be nothing in this Vedic astrology which contradicts what's in the Veda.
Right.
Please.
Yeah.
So, and then people will say, even close friends will say, God, but Vic, you're being really audacious. You're the audacious one. You're challenging all these gurus, and you're challenging, how can you be so audacious? But sometimes you have to be audacious to be humble. Sometimes it's the biggest humility to be audacious. Unfortunately, that's not my case. I just enjoy being audacious, but sometimes it's possible to be doing what I'm doing.
Because you can't have your ascendant in Uttara Ashadha if you are not also humble.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so humble that I'll accept your comfort.
Right. Okay.
But sometimes you do have to defy to be humble.
That's
because
how we
you're
that's
in
how
service
we learn.
of something else. You're in service of something else.
Because look out your window. So out your window, are there all these small cottages, small houses that were there thousands of years ago? Are there mud huts? No. So what's happening? Things are growing, things are evolving, and things are changing. So too does our perception. So too does our understanding. And so to think that things are always going to be static, that's the whole point with tradition too, is things grow, things evolve, things change, things shift, things move on. Old things are questioned. New things are questioned, right? If we don't allow room for growth, then we're limiting ourselves.
Yeah, but I would be careful with that, because I don't want to be painted into the corner that we are changing something.
No, and yeah, exactly.
Right. They have changed something.
Yeah.
And we're taking it back to what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And I agree with you on that. I think the point I'm trying to bring up is that the concept of, if tradition has said for hundreds of years that things should be this way.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at that particular moment in time, it was fitting for things to be that way in that one moment.
Right.
Which at that time, most likely, the two systems coincided. So it fit for things to be that way.
Right.
But
that's why so many
things
statements
no longer
are
fit.
made. That's why so many statements are made. If you ask, my thing is, am I audacious? No, I'm a servant of the Veda. And if I have to be audacious to serve the Veda, then I'll be the most audacious person you ever set your eyes on.
Right.
But if you can show me in the Veda where there's a Veda, I'll include other things that are important too, like Surya Siddhanta. It's not exactly a Veda, but it's pretty, it's a pretty serious book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Parashara or Shastra. I'll accept those two. At least those are like something serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Show me some definition of the Rashis as sidereal. I can show you. What is it? 14 Surya Siddhanta 14:7. I think that's where it begins. When the sun moves north of the equator, Aries begins. This is the definition of what the Rashi is. The best anybody has ever said to me is they'll quote and they'll say, it says here that Aries and Ashwini starts where Aries starts. So that must mean that they're linked together, right? You can find that statement. In fact, right after in Bhagavad Purana, right after it says that the Rashis the Aries begins when the sun comes north. Right after that, 10 verses after that, it says, oh, and by the way, Aries and Ashwini, that they're linked together. But the one thing is the definition. So that's what Tat Tu Samanvayat means, that Brahma Sutra verse. You can't just pick one or the other. Quote from Shastra. You can't just pick one, the one that you like, you pick, and you ignore the other one. That you won't get real truth that way. You have to find some way to make both of these statements work at the same time. And it's simple in this case. At the time that this statement was made, this is an observational statement.
Yes. Yeah.
At the time that this person narrated this Bhagavatam, it did coincide. Aries did coincide with Ashwini. But it doesn't defy the previous statement. In fact, if you look into the Vedangas, and then if you look at the way that you apply hermeneutics, right, to understand text, that's what the Mimamsas are really about. Those two darshans is how we understand text. They'll say that the first statement, the second statement doesn't override the first statement. So, like if I tell you, "Hey, it's hot today," I'm gonna feel a little bit cold. That doesn't mean that it's not hot today. Right. Maybe I'm in a spot where maybe I'm not wearing enough clothes, or maybe I'm in a spot where it's cold or something. Yeah. So the Bhagavatam says, well, the Rashis are tropical, and then it says, well, the Nakshatras and the Rashis are lined up like this. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it means. It means the Rashis are tropical, and they're lined up like this right now.
So Vic, I know you said you only had a limited amount of time today, but something I wanted to make sure that we covered. Yeah. If I'm
kind of on fire, though, I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. Keep going on fire. That's perfectly fine. I got a good amount of time, but there is something I kind of wanted to bring up. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for prompting me to rephrase my sentence, because that was actually a good thing to re-examine in terms of how I was wording that in terms of changing tradition and things like that. But do you think that understanding the nakshatras, truly exploring the nakshatras very deeply, offers us a point whereby the two differing schools of thought can understand the commonality? And do you think that also, because we have to question and we have to grow, and because our thinking is evolving, do you think that exploring nakshatras also offers us the way of understanding a new understanding, not only of astrology, but also of ourselves as individuals, beyond the more limited traditional ways that we have come to define ourselves?
Yeah.
I know it's a pretty broad statement. Yeah.
That's great. But I just had two more things on my mind from the previous.
Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say, actually, the Vedic culture is pretty beautiful because it incorporates the concept that you were talking about, that there also has to be change.
Yeah.
That there's an essence which has to be unchanged, but there's applications or non-essentials which should always change. Yeah. That's why they have a distinction between Shruti and Smriti. The Shruti are the things which will always remain the same, and then the Smritis are the things which change according to who they're being spoken to. And then you have books like Manusmriti. Manusmriti, it's a book. It's part of the Vedic library, but it's not a Shruti. It's a Smriti. It's something that applies to a particular time and place. And not all of the laws that are in there are meant to apply in every culture or every place of the world for all of history. The Veda has that concept built into it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I can't remember the other thing I wanted to say was, if you want to say that the definition of the Rashis is that Aries and Ashwini coincide forevermore, then what do you make of Rig Veda? Because Rig Veda doesn't say that Ashwini is one. This is also where numerology based on Ashwini being one is a big question mark to me. Numerology is always a huge question mark to me, but what do you make of Rig Veda? Rig Veda says that Kritika is number one. And according to anthropology, what is it? Anthropology, archaeology, and linguistic archaeology, and all those things, the way that they'll date Puranas and the way that they'll date Rig Veda will match with the precession of equinoxes, so that the person writing Rig Veda would have counted Kritika first, because Aries would have been in Kritika at that time. When they're linguistically, they're thinking it's about 5,000 years ago. Right. And the person who wrote the Puranas, that was more like 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. maybe 2,000 years ago, then that would be coincide with Aries being an Ashwini, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I actually don't subscribe fully to the anthropological view of the Vedas,
right.
But I don't deny the anthropological view of the Vedas either. These are things that have been put into words at certain times, so you can trace when they've been put into words. It doesn't mean that they're not eternal and transcendental, but they do also manifest in history through a phenomenological process that can be traced by history. Okay, then your question, what about the nakshatras? That's nice. Take it back down to earth. Like, I always feel this way, like, darn, the bad thing about being a punk rocker and saying that the Rashis are not sidereal is that I lose so many friends. Or even if people are nice enough not to put me on their blacklist, still it's like hard to exchange with them, because whenever you say, yeah, so Jupiter, in Scorpio, blah, 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 it'll be like, no, Jupiter is in Sagittarius. Or, whatever, you just can't get on the same page.
Oh, yeah. But see, I have it worse than you.
Not that.
Because it's a different nakshatra with me, too, in most instances.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so you have it. You're hit from both ends.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, at least for me, it's like I can finally, at least we can both agree that my moon is in Rohini.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might think my moon is in Taurus, and I might think it's in Gemini, but at least we both agree that it's in Rohini. So let's just explore that.
But there is a commonality with the nakshatras, as long as you're not calculating nakshatras tropically, which by my school and Vic school you should not be doing anyway. There is going to be a commonality or a close commonality through the dashas, through nakshatra dashas. And that's more why I think it's important that the two differing schools of thought recognize, on one level, our schools of thought are not differing that greatly, because there's an essence that's underneath it.
Yeah.
That we all need to be understanding more deeply.
Yeah. And the other essence too is that the planets' positions relative to each other are the same regardless of whether they're at 1 degree Aries or 15 degrees Broadway in New York City. Yeah. So because your measurement for each one, your measurement changes for all of them. So another common place would be in aspects. Yeah. We could also hold common ground discussing aspects.
Exactly. Yes.
And also relative to the house cusps. So that's another place where there's people who are wondering, like, well, if it's really true that Rashis are not sidereal, how come I had a reading with the sidereal astrology and it was a great reading? Well, there's many reasons for that. One is because a lot of what makes a reading great has nothing to do with astrology.
Exactly. Yep.
And another thing is because there are so many ways to get a particular goal accomplished.
Yeah.
To put it negatively, like smoking causes cancer, but so does exposure to X-rays.
Yeah.
So it's not that if you didn't smoke, you can't get cancer. So it's not like you can't get a correct interpretation if you don't do it this way with this system. There's many other ways to do it. And the people people who are good tend to find a way to make the thing work, whatever they're using.
Yeah.
Like I say, you can put furniture together with a screwed up screwdriver, with a messed up screwdriver. If your screwdriver's not perfect. But what happens when you get a real good screwdriver? You feel like,
God, that's what 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what happens if you switch tropical, but you have to remember that it's not going to make sense to you for a while, because you have so many samskars of looking and thinking. You have so many mental habits of looking and thinking about things from the previous perspective that you've been looking at for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And also you've developed techniques that have made things work for you. And you'll even read like the way people describe signs. And Indian astrology has veered away from really strongly interpreting the effect of a planet in a sign, and it's really going more towards a house, because that's more actually durable.
Yeah.
That's more durable regardless of whether it's sidereal or tropical. It doesn't change as much. But you'll find that if you change to tropical and then you also just pare down make a whole new fresh start.
Yeah.
Don't just, make a fresh start and say, let's start back at square one. And what does this planet mean? What does that planet mean? What does this sign mean? What's that sign mean? What's this house mean? What's that house mean? Okay, now let me look at this tropical chart and just use that. I'm not going to care about this Bindu and that Ashduk thing and this transiting Karaka of my grandmother. Just work it down to the basics and just look at this thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, this is speaking to me pretty easy.
Yeah.
See what happens if you give me some
but
something that I'm into. And
but see, that's good. But it's interesting too, because when I first started working with astrology, I found, like I was telling you, I tended to gravitate more towards the nakshatras. But it's because I found myself to be, to be blunt, I found that the Rashis and the houses using the system that I was using at that time, which was Lahiri, Ayanamsha, and a sidereal zodiac, it wasn't always lining up for me. But the nakshatras were, right?
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. You reach a certain point where if you're trying a new system, you can't just try that system on one or two charts and go, oh, this doesn't work. 30, 40, 50, 60, you're talking, right?
Yeah.
And if you're finding this is working across this many more charts more accurately than what I was doing before, then you make the shift to the other thing. And for me, it was just this like immediate thing of when I started working with tropical and sidereal. Whereas before, I would look at a chart and I would do a lot of presupposition, right? Of going, well, this might mean this kind of, if I stretch this direction. And it's like you're talking about with the screwdriver, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't an insult to those who do use a sidereal zodiac, because there are people who give wonderful predictions using a sidereal zodiac.
And it's actually a compliment to them. It's a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're a great musician, you can make a half and half guitar sound wonderful.
Exactly. But I found when I started using tropical with sidereal nakshatras, I wasn't having to go scurrying trying to stretch something in any direction. It was just there.
Yeah.
Like boom, there.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the difference. Yeah. But again, I keep wanting to come back to nakshatras because they're my big thing, really. But
well, I love them. What happened now? The Sedona conference is going to be fun.
I know.
So I got Dennis offered me a spot in the conference itself.
Excellent.
So I'm going to have a 2.5 hour, what do you call a lecture or a presentation?
Oh, good.
2.5 hour, and it's going to be about nakshatras.
Excellent.
Gods of the stars.
Wonderful. And that's the point. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's the point that we need to understand with the nakshatras. The gods of the nakshatras are so very, very important. They're so very, very important. If you're missing that aspect of it, you're missing it completely. Another point with the nakshatras that I think a lot of people aren't really exploring. I might have to share my screen in order to bring this up. I don't know what text this is from, but I'm going to share it with everybody anyway.
I forgot that we were doing YouTube, actually. I just
that's okay.
We were talking to each other.
Oh, that's okay. That's a compliment too, right? Okay, which is, let me bring this up and let's share this document. Each nakshatra has a basis above, a basis below, and a result when the basis above and basis below connect. And there's really so much there that if you explore that, you really begin to understand it. Because what this is about, basis above, basis below, what does that tell you immediately, Vic? Basis above, basis below.
I don't know. I'm going to ask you what that means.
Heaven and earth. So this whole point that we're talking about, what the nakshatras do, they're that bridge for growing our consciousness. So, for instance, one I always like bringing relevance to is Magha, right? whereas the basis above is mourning, and the basis below is leaving the body.
Mm.
With Magha Nakshatra, it's the first Tamasic Nakshatra. So the primal spark behind all of creation is becoming encased in a material form. So basis above being heavens. What do the heavens do in association with that? They mourn. They mourn that the individual is, coming down here and being encased. Much like the Petries, the ancestors would mourn, right? You're not listening to us, right? You're missing the point, so to speak. Basis below, the individual down here is leaving the body, right? They're on one level disconnecting with the source, so to speak. And the combination of basis above with the heavens mourning and basis below with us leaving the body is death. And each of these nakshatras has, and I may be getting off topic here, so please pardon me, but each nakshatra has one of these, and you can really learn so much about each nakshatra if you only know the deity, the Shakti, and the basis and result.
I like the basis. I like the result of Ashlesha, destruction of the victim.
So here, while we're on the subject, basis above, approach of the serpent. So the heavens give this thing to us that we're really afraid of, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Basis below, what do? We tremble and we get scared about it, right? And the result of that is destruction of the victim. So we have a choice with that, right? Destruction of the victim, right? Oh, I'm always so hard done by. Things are always horrible in my life. Well, you can destroy that and tap into your potential. And then you're not afraid of anything that happens.
I like
that. Yeah.
Do you know my nickname used to be when I was a kid?
What's that?
Victor the Victim.
Ah.
And then they used to sing this Ronnie James Dio song to me. Yeah, I think it was like, you're just a victim, but they would change it to Victor the Victim.
Oh, goodness.
No, but they were my friends. They weren't.
Yeah.
That's what friends do. They make fun of each other.
Exactly.
That's how you can know too. If a person is really sincere, then they can also make fun of you. It's not just always yes, Guruji, yes, Guruji.
Yeah.
There was actually. So you said like if you just know the deity. For me, all I need to know, the only thing that I need for the nakshatra is the deity.
Right.
Then these other things all make sense.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to go.
Wonderful, Vic. Thanks for being
so
on again today. Oh, my pleasure. And sometime soon we will connect again.
Do it again. Because there's another thing that's really interesting to explore if we really want to hammer this point.
Okay.
The other thing that's interesting to explore is that Rashis have the qualities of the Rashis, the essential qualities of the Rashis are their mode and their element and their ruler. Especially the element and the mode are inexplicable. There's no logic to them.
Right.
If it's sidereal.
Right.
But there's a very simple, easy, rational logic if it's tropical. So that's another plus.
Let's keep that topic and let's do that. I get what you're talking about. Let's
if we want to, but sometimes I don't want to just be like the guy who disagrees with everybody all the time in every video. Okay,
no, you're wrong.
Again, okay. No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.